All right, we're here as the Lost Rider Podcast. Good morning and welcome to the second half of this week's News from the Camp House. We're here today. We are at the Professional Outdoor Media Association Conference in Hugo, Minnesota. And we're sitting here today with Mr. Garrett Edmonds. He's with the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. He is also with the Public Lands Council. He works in D.C. and, trying to make sure his job is representing all the grazing allotments on federal lands and, making sure that these public lands, which have become a big controversy again, the public use of these things. Okay, the general public, Garrett, the general public is a little bit removed from this issue. They hear it, and it is kind of a convoluted issue because there is so much federal land, there's state land, there's so many different types of federal land. And whenever the discussion comes up, it all gets clumped into public lands. I always thought that was dishonest and disingenuous to do that because there's too many. Every place is different, and it's every instance is different. So that doesn't seem right. But now here's one of the things that also comes up. We note that at the end of some administrations, you see them adding more lands, more public lands. They go out and they'll make something into a monument or a park or a forest service. They'll add more, put it in BLM. And at the end of some of these administrations, they add lands, and the folks who like that, they're all cheering. All right, but then you get an administration like we have now, and they're going, all right, well, we got this, we're going to use it. Well, then the other side starts belly aching. They don't want you to use it. And then an administration like we have right now, you'll get the headline that says, X amount, another 100,000 or 500,000 acres open to public access. And the public's generally people who are removed from the issue sit there going, well, I thought we already had access. And they don't know that some of this land gets set aside, but it's not set aside for use.
Yeah, and there's a number of issues to address there. So I'll start with, the monuments, for example. Over the course of administrations, you have the shrinking and expansion of national monuments. And, I think we can all agree. Preserving the landscape is important. Preserving some of the heritage in these areas is important. But preservation doesn't mean going unmanaged. And so when we see these monument expansions go through in certain administrations where they want to remove the multiple use that's happening and occurring on that landscape, typically that's opening you up to more harm than anything else. And so getting into the second point, when you talk about landscapes that, our public have been there but haven't been open, a lot of that comes down to management and whether or not there is clear access to it. One of the things that we're really pushing for right now in Congress is effective forest management. So when we talk about our nation's forests and working with the U.S. Forest Service, we have lands that are so overgrown and so unmanaged that it's probably not good for the public to be in there. You can't. The roads aren't managed. There's not good access, and that just, again, not to just keep harping on it, but it is serious. It opens us up to more severe fire that is only harder to contain and prevent in the long run. And so a lot of our efforts are focused on opening up these vacant allotments. Let's get some use back on those lands, whether that's grazing, cattle or sheep, get effective forest management in there so we can see species return to their habitats and have a healthy ecosystem. And also, again, just to prevent the wildfire that we're seeing just blaze across the western landscape.
All right, so yes, management, but access. What does it mean when they say, and I think I know what it means, but when they say, okay, we've just opened up another 500,000 acres to public access, and of course, then that side cheers. But what is that access?
I think some of it could be infrastructure that needed to be in place, road management, maintenance, those sorts of things, and just allowing the public to be able to access those areas. I think that's a large part of it. You also have areas that, again, if fire swept through, there's a cleanup that needs to take place. Again, just going back to rebuilding some of that critical infrastructure that needs to be there.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Now, are you familiar? The next thing that comes up is this corner crossing deal. And that ages ago, I got it in the Missouri breaks. And we went across private property to access the breaks. I went back 25 years later to take some of my buddies hunting in there, and I couldn't go there because now you couldn't you couldn't get to the breaks where I wanted to go because I had to go through a little part of somebody's ranch to get there. And the confusing part to everybody, well, other people, is that the fences don't follow the boundaries. The fences follow grass because the ranchers have a grazing allotment on the breaks. And so your fence, you hit a fence, you go, well, I can't cross the fence. Well, that's not necessarily the deal because it's BLM and you have access to that, but you got to really pull out a map and study it to figure out where in the hell you're at because you can't go by the fence. But now this corner crossing deal is a discussion because now people want to have access to public lands through private property. Sometimes that's the only way to get there.
Yeah, and this is an ongoing conversation. It's one that, I remember first coming on when I first came on board with PLC, the Public Lands Council. It was kind of popping up at the time there, and to your point, it's popping up again now. I mean, look, our advocacy is guided by a grassroots policy process, and so for our members, that policy right now looks like we protect private property, and so the corner crossing conversation is a little bit more challenging for us, just quite simply because, again, our stance is to protect private property rights. That's what our ranchers have asked us to do, and that's what we intend to do. But to your point, I think there is a lot of acknowledgement as to how long ago these lines were drawn, and following the maps and navigating that is a challenge that is, I think, up for conversation.
All right. Okay. So we're not going to decide that here today. But okay, there's one last thing I really wanted to ask about, and I know most people at home don't think about this, but in northern Montana there was a push it was some prairie, America's prairie something, and they were trying to put buffalo. They were buying up ranches, and they're in ranches that had BLM land, and they wanted, it looked like they wanted to make another new Yellowstone Park out of the Missouri breaks and all that prairie country up there and just cover it up with buffalo. But buffalo, I'm going to let you explain it. Buffalo are wild animals. They're not subject to grazing allotments. So this group that was really pushing this and have put millions of dollars into this project have been stymied.
Yes, and you are exactly right. Under current frameworks, they do not qualify as livestock. Quite frankly, what we have seen over the last several years is some of these environmental activist groups from your urban areas that we discussed in the earlier segment have come to the conclusion that they will try to secure these permits, secure some of these leases, and initially try to put buffalo on there for conservation. Conservation is not a multiple use under the frameworks of the multiple use mandate. Conservation is a byproduct of multiple use and management. Okay. And putting these buffalo on the landscape, what they were doing, quite frankly, was wrong under the current frameworks of obtaining a grazing permit. I think this is something we're going to continue to see. We see these environmental groups, whether now that even if they can't have buffalo, are just trying to keep these permits open where they hold them, but nothing goes on the landscape. And quite frankly, it's unfortunate to see, because if you're truly an environmentalist, you have to understand that also means you have to work the landscape. It doesn't mean just letting it sit there and deteriorate and grow up from mismanagement.
Right. Okay. And what I think one of the things we should remind people, because, we use words and stuff, that's not a good way to talk. We use words and terminologies, and the person who's not really into it or just hears it and then is, on the fence and just a regular Joe public, when we talk about preservation, explain preservation versus conservation.
Well, preservation in some people's mind is seeing a landscape never change. Conservation is having a landscape in the form it should be in, but also managed to where it can still be appreciated. I think that's a big difference. And in some cases they kind of go together, but conservation still means management.
We'll look at Yellowstone. You want to preserve Yellowstone, you geysers, all the pretty things in Yellowstone, Grand Canyon, Yellowstone. You want to preserve all that pretty stuff in Yellowstone. In the meantime, you got to look at managing the wildlife, and that's conservation. So you can preserve something and still have to practice conservation.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to be made.
So, all right, okay. Well, I certainly appreciate you being with us, taking a little time here. Like I said, tell my listeners we're at the POMA conference in Hugo, Minnesota. Garrett, thanks for being with us this morning.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, folks. Now, I hope you got something out of that, learn a little something you can put in your pocket so you can talk smart next time somebody opens up a discussion about public lands. So, go out, have a great weekend. This edition was also brought to us by Shaw's Bend Social Club, country club folks who don't have a country club. Y'all go out, have a good weekend, be safe, have fun, and just remember, pretty much any day is sure a good day to be out in the woods.